In this video we're going to look at total quality management and quality tools. By quality tools we mean here the techniques that management may use to achieve total quality management. There's a list of some of the basic quality tools that we may come across. So for example, flowcharts, and I'll talk about these again later on. I'm going to skip through them quite fast at the moment, and we'll go back and look at them later in the video. But a flowchart, and if you look at the very bottom of the diagram, we've got a specimen flowchart. We have some situation, say the green rectangle on the left. I'll just put the cursor onto the screen here, this one here, and we have some sort of decision. Is it meeting some sort of quality outcome? Is it acceptable? If it is, then go back and just continue to monitor it. If it's not, it might need something to be done to it. It needs to be changed or altered, or something needs to be looked at. And I won't go through the rest, but essentially that's what a flow chart is. It's looking at situations, it looks at decisions, and seeing if the process is acceptable or not acceptable, and if it is acceptable, continue monitoring it. If it's not acceptable, then it must be dealt with and some changes made to the process. So that's a basic quality tool that organizations may use. Next we have check sheets, just looking at the number of defects. We've got, in the example at the bottom of the page, bottom of the slide, we've got A, B and C as defects, and we have the time period along the top. We have the first day, second, third, fourth, and we have the number of defects in each box. So management can look ahead and see where the issues are arising and which ones need prompt attention, which ones need immediate attention. So we have another tool for looking at quality, and it's a sort of metric. It's a measurement tool. It feeds back to management and says we're getting a lot of defects of type A. This situation needs to be looked at, and management can focus in on that one and deal with that immediately. But really, total quality management, there should be no defects. All of the boxes here should not have tick marks. They should be empty, because it's total quality management. That is the aspiration. Next we have histograms. Histogram can show findings pictorially. It can represent the frequency of errors and the types of error. So in this case, let's say type of error C is the most frequently encountered. So management knows which one to focus in on again and to deal with immediately. Then we have what's known as Pareto charts, named after the Italian economist Alfredo Pareto, who lived around the 1930s. The Pareto chart is just a diagram that categorizes occurrences from the most frequent down to the least frequent. So the most frequent occurrence here is a defect of type C. So whatever C is, there's a problem with that particular process. There's a defect there, and most defects are occurring with C. The next most frequent is B, then D, and then A, and then E. So what this particular Pareto chart does is it collects the most frequently occurring defect, puts it number one, then the next most frequent, and so on. Scatter diagrams are used in statistics a lot, but again, it shows how the variables go against each other over time and what the pattern is. It just indicates patterns. Control charts, we have an upper control limit and a lower control limit, and providing the production system remains within those limits, it will be acceptable. Now those limits are set by management, and ideally there should be no variation. Total quality management does not have variation. Any variation is not acceptable. But in practice, particularly in complicated situations, there may be some degree of variation. But providing it's within those tolerances, it will be acceptable. We have cause and effect diagrams where we have different types of inputs, materials, people, equipment, different methods, and they go to make up the product, and some of these may be defective. There may be something causing a problem. One of them may not be good quality, or one of them may not be properly done. So it can help the management identify what's causing the problem. As I said, I'll deal with all of these again later, but just for the moment, just to introduce it. And then we have check sheets. Sorry, I didn't skip one. Sorry, check sheets. Now, check sheets are looking at what went wrong and the amount that was wrong, the extent of the error, the types of error, and just simply keeps a tally of those. And it can produce it to the management and say, these are the errors that have occurred, this is the extent of the error, this is the nature of the error, this is where it occurred. And management can look at all of the errors that are picked up, all of the issues that are picked up from the production system, and can then prioritize those and deal with them. And that's simply the idea of a check sheet. The histogram, as I said earlier, is just a bar chart of frequencies of outcomes. The frequencies is simply the number of times that the situation arises, that particular event arises. And let's say we've got the time to repair in minutes, time to repair a particular process. Now you can see here the frequency, the number of times that the repair is being required, and which aspect of the business requires most attention in terms of repairs that have to be done, and which machines are least reliable. It gives a picture of the organization, and management can then try to deal with that and try to reduce it. Ideally, there should not be downtime. Machines should be running and should be well maintained and well looked after and running as required. And this type of picture, this type of histogram, enables the management to see where breakdowns are occurring, which machines, how long the machines are down, and it gives them some information and something to work on. The Pareto analysis I mentioned earlier, well, here we just simply group the problems from the most frequent down to the least frequent. So a machine could be, let's say, off-center, so it's not producing an ideal output, it's producing a product which is not completely symmetric, or it's not suitable for purpose. It may be just about acceptable, but it may not. So it's an off-center problem. So that could be the most frequent. The next one, it could be smeared print. It could be some item which has to be printed out, and the printing machine is not given a clear image, it's not given a clear picture of what's required. So that could be the next most frequent problem. And the next one is, it could be missing a label, which is not as serious as the smeared print or the off-center, but it's there nonetheless. And it's often said about Pareto that one of the outcomes is that 80% of problems may be caused by 20% of the processes. So causes, 20% of the causes cause 80% of the problems. So it may be, that's just an expression. It's not meant to be a statistical law or a particular rule. It's just an expression. In other words, some small amount of manufacturing process may take up a lot of time to maintain. So a lot of effort has to be put into maintaining some particular small process. And that's the problem. The management needs to keep all the processes running, but sometimes small issues, small problems can cause a lot of time and a lot of hold-up. So management should be careful about that. If we take this, what looks like histogram over here, well, it is a histogram, but if we take that, we could represent it simply as a line. So we have this type of situation here. We have the number of defects, and we could have a percentage scale on the right hand side. So when we add all together, we've got 100% of the problems, and we can see that, let's say, 44% of them are caused by off-center. Between 44 and 75, which is 31, is caused by smeared print. So we're just adding up and moving across, and that's how we get the cumulative curve. If we consider intervention by management in the drive to get total quality management, then what we would have is the Pareto curve we've just had on the left, and then after the improvements have been made, we'd expect the curve to look like the one on the right. The significance of the errors and the problems has been reduced. So intervention and management intervention and dealing with the issues and perhaps acquiring a new machine or retraining the staff or whatever was required has meant a big improvement, in this case moving from before to after. It could be a scatter diagram. We have sales in the east and sales in the west in this case, and we can get a picture of where the sales are taking place and at what point the east is most important and what point the west is most important, and it gives us a picture. That's just something which is easy to understand. Scatter diagrams, well, we can use scatter diagrams to work out correlations, statistical correlations. We could have an index for quality, for example, and we could have one for time spent on particular processes, and we can do a correlation. We can ask the Excel spreadsheet, for example, to work out a correlation between two variables, and it tells us what the degree of statistical relationship between the two are. You have to be careful about correlation because it doesn't indicate what's known as causation. It doesn't say one is causing the other. It just simply says these two are related statistically. The patterns are related statistically, but it doesn't mean they're actually related in practice. We can do correlations between any two variables. It doesn't mean one is causing the other. So we have to be careful when we work out correlations. The control chart, well, we have the upper control limit and the lower control limit, and we have providing the variations within that, providing those are the tolerance level, and providing that output is within the tolerance levels, it's acceptable. But ideally under Tqm there shouldn't be variation. Tqm is very strict. It should really be looking at constant quality for everything. So we'd have the constant line. In this case, the line which is just about at 1,000. That would be representing the outcome. But we can see here from our control chart here that there is some variation. The little red squares indicate variation, but they're within what's acceptable, so they would be run through. If they were outside of the upper control limit or under the lower control limit, then there would be rejects, and that should call management into look at the situation and try and fix it to make sure that there were no rejects. Tqm does not tolerate rejects. It doesn't have rejects. Even if all the processes run through and they're all within tolerance levels, like the control chart here is suggesting, if all the processes in the business were to be acceptable in terms of tolerance and go through, this is the basis for continual improvement. Management will then go back and look at the control charts and try and squeeze out that variation. And we'll talk about this again in a few moments, but the idea is to tighten the upper control level and the lower control level to reduce the distance between the two, tighten it up so the tolerances are even smaller. And continuous improvement and the drive for continuous improvement will be to tighten up those control levels. Cause and effect, well, we've got various inputs. We have the environment and production methods, people, equipment, materials, and there can be a problem anywhere. Something may cause a problem with the materials. It may not be good quality, or the machines are not functioning properly. The tooling needs to be replaced, or people are being asked to perform functions for which they're not adequately trained. So there can be a problem anywhere along the line. If you look ahead in practice, say airline ticket errors, well, the errors could be caused by the quality of the paper for the ticket, and the quality of the paper may depend on the age of the paper, and it may also depend on the type of carbon that's used for airline tickets. Now, I know that in the modern world we don't have airline tickets, but some companies, in particularly small airlines, might have small amounts of tickets because they don't have the capacity to have high-level equipment using e-tickets and so on. But it's an example. That's the only point. It means that somewhere along the line the system can break down for various reasons, and it's important that the management is able to trace down what is it exactly that's causing the problem. So whatever the output, we're going to have a list of various factors along the way, and we can identify those factors by using a chart such as this. As I said, I'm well aware of the fact that e-tickets have taken over the world, but small airlines might have airline tickets. But it doesn't matter, it's the principle we're trying to discuss. A run chart looking at the again the variation on a particular run in production. If machines are producing the same item, then we might find some variation, and the variation may occur over a time period, and again that information may be fed back to the management, who will make decisions about what to do about it. So in the example we've got here on the slide, when the machine has been running, let's say 12 hours, you can see that the diameter is much bigger than at the start. When at the start, within 1 hour, it was at 0.5. It's gone up to 0.58. So it may be there's an issue with the machines running for a long period, and requires management to look into what can be done about that, because the quality should remain constant right throughout. It shouldn't vary over time. It could also be the case, of course, that the machines are running for long periods and the operators are working for long periods, and the operators become fatigued and need a rest, need a break. Maybe that's what's causing the variation. But management should look into it, because the commitment is to have no errors, no defects, and no variation. I mentioned earlier that with tolerances, management intervention will try to squeeze or tighten up on the tolerances. And here's a way of looking at it. We start on the left. We've got quite wide tolerances. We've got an upper control limit and a lower control limit. And you can see that the actual outcome is bouncing around in between both of them. But at one stage, it's right at the upper control limit. Now, that's still acceptable, but only just. And that should be flagged up to management. Management will want to look into why this happened, what caused it. And insofar as there is variation, it's in a sense unacceptable in terms of the philosophy, the total quality management philosophy. So management will want to squeeze out all that variation. So they will have a policy of continuous improvement, continuous intervention, so as to reduce the variation. And what they will start by doing is trying to reduce the tolerance levels. So in the middle diagram, you can see the tolerance levels have been tightened up. They're closer together. So now there's less variation. There's less tolerance of variation. And on the one on the right, they're tightened even further. And of course, this tightening of the tolerance will continue until it's down to a very small amount, ideally down to zero. Each item should be identical. That's how quality is improved. Methods for generating ideas about all of this. Well, could be brainstorming, generating a free flow of ideas in a group of people. Just asking the operators from the shop floor and the line management and senior management, middle management, ask people to attend a meeting and don't have an agenda, don't have any structure to the meeting, just a piece of paper, a large flip chart, let's say, paper and a pen, or a whiteboard and a pen, and just ask them for ideas about certain problems and get them to talk freely. It doesn't matter what they're saying. Some might be unrealistic, some might just say things off the top of their head. It doesn't matter. Just write everything down and then go through a process of eliminating the extremes, or eliminating ideas that clearly will not work or are not acceptable. And you will find, perhaps and hopefully, that there are some ideas which may contain some useful insight. And then it's a question of focusing in on those and seeing if they can be worked on. But a good place to start is brainstorming, just simply asking for ideas and scribbling the ideas down, and very free, very open approach to problem solution. Could be quality circles, where again people from the operations side, from line management to operators to anybody involved in that side, may be invited in to the office for half an hour once a week and just talk about particular problems, raise problems and discuss them. And in this case, minutes could be kept and action plans could be set out, and people asked to look into certain problems and report back for the next meeting, so that there is a more formalized way of looking at quality and ways of improving quality. Group of workers who find ways of improving the situation. Workers are very skilled, a lot of them, and very adept at finding solutions. When something goes wrong, if they know it's gone wrong and they can see a fix, an immediate solution, then they're the ones who know the situation, they're the ones who know the process. The chances are they're going to latch on to what is a good idea and will start to fix it. But they should report the incident as well, so that everyone's aware that there was a problem and how it was overcome. But groups of workers may collaborate and discuss amongst themselves particular situations and look at how to improve that situation. Interviewing is always on the cards. Interviewing the operators from the shop floor, interviewing the line management, trying to get feedback on particular issues and feedback on the intervention that management has taken to solve solutions, and getting information about what is likely to go wrong, what their feelings are about the system, any issues that need to be addressed immediately, What do they think is going to happen in the intermediate period or even in the long period? So a whole series of comments coming back about what's happening in terms of production and quality. And these should be taken seriously and perhaps worked on. If line management and line operators see a problem that is likely to occur in the future, to see the possibility of it, then instead of firefighting, instead of fixing it when it's gone wrong, go and deal with it before it goes wrong. Benchmarking, simply taking best practice and then trying to compare what is actually happening with the best practice. The best practice may be an idealization. It might be what they want to achieve. They want to achieve no defects, let's say. That's an idealization in some respects because that is not happening. That's what they want to achieve. So that's the benchmark, if you like. And then what is actually happening, compare that with what they want. That's the idea of benchmarking. It's a comparison between two situations. This 5W2H, what, why, where, when, who, and then we've got how and how much. Well, answering these questions is always tricky. What's the problem? Why is it a problem? Where exactly is the problem? When did it happen? Who was working on it at the time? How did it show up as a problem? And how big is the problem? They're, in a sense, normal questions to ask, normal diagnostic type questions to ask when a problem arises. But posing the questions may generate ideas about how to solve the problem and also to fix it from happening again in the future. Now let's go back over and talk about some of these in a little more detail. Quality circles. Well, it's a team approach. List reduction. Well, choosing, let's say, going to see a film or a movie with friends on a Friday night. So the list is reducing the possibilities of decisions down to one, let's say. List reduction, reducing options down to one, is only done by negotiations and by looking at the various alternatives. So instead of going to see a film or see a movie on a Friday night, they could have gone to the restaurant, or they could have gone for a walk in the park. But they choose the movie. Now that can be done, that decision can be done through talking, through a process. This sounds very formalized in the context of the example I've just given, but a type of analysis of the benefits, the costs, the upsides, the downsides of doing one course of action as opposed to the other. The balance sheet, well, choosing an apartment to stay and the advantages and disadvantages of each option. So the quality circle idea is looking at all the pros and cons of a situation. If it's back to the example of industry again, the balance sheet approach will look at the most effective use of resources, and it'll ask the team to be realistic in its selection of issues to discuss in terms of what can be done and the available envelope of resources. In terms of quality circles and the company, the list reduction one is to start with a wide list of issues, or a wide remit, which may be generated from brainstorming earlier, and then to focus in on one of them. And in a sense, we do it all in our private lives as well. That's the examples I'm giving here. We go to see a film, and we go to the cinema with friends on a Friday night, let's say, because we have reduced all the different alternatives down to one, and that's the one we follow. But we have looked at all of the various activities that could have been undertaken on the Friday night. With the balance sheet approach, we're looking at the costs, we're looking at the benefits of doing one course of action as opposed to another. And generally we have paired-wise comparisons. Try to eliminate alternatives by comparison. So we compare situations and try to work out which one is best, one compared against the other, and then we compare that against the next one. And we have this transitive relationship. We have, if A is better than B and B is better than C, then A is better than C. So we're able to make decisions based on the comparisons of two alternatives. We have two alternatives, we select the best one. And we continue to do that, so we're able to get an overall picture of what's the best way forward. So when we look at quality circles, what we try to do with quality circles is we have a long list perhaps of different issues that need to be addressed. We try to reduce the list. That's the first thing. We try to reduce it, and we do this in our personal lives, we do it in production, we do it all over the place. We try to deal with one issue, and we have to select that one issue. And to do that, we're going to need some criteria. And the criteria may be based on the second point, which is the balance sheet. We may look at the costs and look at all of the issues associated with the selection of some particular activity that needs attention. The costs, the benefits of getting it right. So it's a more calculated approach to dealing with particular issues. So the quality circle will have a large number of issues to look at, perhaps, all the product of, let's say, brainstorming, which we'll talk about again in a few moments. So the brainstorming exercise is given it many issues. It leads to reduce those many issues down to a manageable size. So it needs to focus in, get which one is it going to look at, and what criteria is it going to use in order to focus in on that one. Well, it might use the balance sheet approach, which is the pros and cons. Or it could go with this paired-wise comparison. It could say, well, if we deal with that issue and that issue, then we're partly getting an insight into the third issue, and it's starting to rationalize the processes until it ends up with a limited number of situations to deal with. And then for the next meeting, those issues should be dealt with. And then, of course, it may be possible to go back to the ones who were not dealt with immediately. Because after all, the whole drive in TQM is to get everything right, get the quality 100%. Let's look at benchmarking. Identify a critical process that needs improving. So benchmarking process is to set out comparisons for processes. The management should know what the process is capable of, how many units can be produced in a day or in an hour, and assuming that the quality is perfect, how many will be produced. And if it's not, look at these critical processes, these very important processes, and see what needs to be done. So it's a question of identifying within the organization the processes that are done very well, and it could also be looking at organizations that are very good at performing particular processes, because the company needs to benchmark, and it needs to know what's a good benchmark, what's a good standard to set. And there might be industry standards, for example, and the company wants to achieve industry standards. By and large, companies will want to go further than that in terms of TQM and to build up a reputation as a high quality producer within that sector. But it might want to look at industry leaders and look at their processes if possible, and that will indicate what sort of benchmarks can be set. In fact, when companies do this, they don't have to look at similar companies. They could look at companies from different sectors, companies who simply built up a very good reputation from instituting certain policies and certain procedures. And that might be a guideline for the business as to how to go about setting up benchmarking. Sometimes organizations will help each other, particularly if they're not competitors. They will help each other to show each other what they're doing. And sometimes companies revel, they enjoy the possibility of instructing other companies about how they got it right. So contact the organization and ask for confidentiality and give them confidentiality if so required. But contact them and see if they're prepared to pass on good practice. And as I said, the companies may be in entirely different sectors. Then analyze the data. Analyze the data from particular processes that the company is interested within its own production process. So look at a particular machine. Look at the output from the machine, the output from the involvement of the worker and the machine, and the tooling and the throughput. Look at the quality that's coming out. Analyze it. And improve the process. Look for ways to improve it. But in the analysis of the data, there should be the benchmark. And the benchmark tells the observer what should be achieved. The actual output is what is being achieved. And if there's a mismatch, the extent of the mismatch may trigger off intervention. If there's a big gap between what is meant to happen and what is actually happening, then the management should be involved to try and reduce that gap, to try and fix it. And that's the power of benchmarking. It triggers off intervention. So the management know what should happen, and they also know what is happening, and therefore they can intervene and try and fix the situation. So the whole idea is to improve the critical process. Benchmarking numbers is much more common than benchmarking processes. By and large, benchmarking does require quantification. The management need to know how many units are going to be produced in an hour, how many units should be produced in the hour, how many actually are, and that will trigger off. It's not as subjective, it's not amenable to subjective reasoning as such. Somebody's opinion that this machine could work faster than it is, or could have a higher quality than it has, that's not really sufficient to trigger the intervention. They need to have more evidence for them to justify the time in intervention and trying to fix what is essentially something that hasn't gone wrong. It's just not performing to some imagined standard. So benchmarking is important. It's trying to work out what the process should make in a certain time period versus what it actually makes, and if there's a big gap as defined by the management, then intervention should take place. But the whole idea with TQM is that there should be no gap. The benchmarking should be met perfectly for each process, and the quality should be 100%. The quality should be perfect from each process. So these are some of the TQM tools that we can look at. That's all I'm going to deal with in this session, so I'm going to leave it there and say thank you for watching.